boys. Like, come on.
She interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's okay. It's reassuring to hear her voice and to know that she wasn't recording just before.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's yeah, we're basically just have like a Diddy setup going where we get people before the chat, they don't know they're being recorded and they say really horrible things, and then from then on they'll be our bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's only $5 a month. I mean, we're not the worst blackmailers. It's very
You know,
Yeah, it's literally
as a
like,
Patreon growth strategy, I think that
yes,
really works well.
that's it. If
that's a
you
pretty good tier. We don't release the blackmail. I kind of like that as a tier.
Nice,
and
nice.
remember to smash that subscribe button or else.
Yeah.
All right. This is Soapbox. We are back after a while since we've done a movie, and it seemed appropriate. I know everyone in the world is doing this right now, but like that doesn't mean we shouldn't have our own moment to honor and talk about David Lynch in one of his films. So we today are together here with Matt Dragonstone, and we
Hey,
are
hey.
talking about Mulholland Drive and whatever else we feel like. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, guys. It's nice to be here.
It's nice to have you. Um, I'm. What made you choose this one over any other particular Lynch film? I mean, I
Oh.
kind of get it, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's sort of doubling down on that topical nature of news right now. So not only, has Uncle Dave left us, but also, LA has left us, and the film is um, uh, I heard it referred to as a poisonous Valentine to Hollywood and LA generally, and I think the synchronicity between Lynch's departure and the events over there at the moment made it kind of very sort of interesting to me, and that's why I chose the film. The other option was this really niche '70s Australian horror film called Picnic at Hanging Rock, and I thought,
Oh no, I've seen that.
you've seen it? Holy shit!
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Just because it is known for being so weird, and that's what's his name? Is it Weir? Is that the director?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Peter Weir, I think, who
Peter
also did
Weir,
Master
yeah,
and Commander. Yeah, that's a really interesting
What?
movie. Yeah,
yeah.
That's one of my all-time. Like if I had to
yeah,
pick and
that movie's fantastic. And Picnic at Hanging Rock is. We should cover that at some point. It is a very bizarre movie. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to meet the only other person who's watched it that I've ever met.
Really?
you know, yeah, it's kind of a little bit dated in Australia. So film
Okay.
students, yes, definitely they'll watch it. Film buffs will have watched it, but I kind of know neither. And so I'm approaching Picnic at Hanging Rock and also most film that I watch without a critical lens, which I think for Mulholland Drive is a positive going
Yeah.
into it rather than of trying to approach it through an analytical structure. So,
yeah, for sure.
It, it's just you talking about it being synchronistic to what's going on now. I mean, it's just that is really wild because this movie ends with everything going up in smoke. Which holy shit!
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What I was like getting in my head about all that was like, okay, imagine there's some like terrorists who are gonna blow up a hotel, and they're like, this is just metaphorically speaking. There's like, and then they're about to do it, and they get this call at the last moment. There's some crime boss staying there, and they have to wait. They can't do it now. They gotta wait. But then like somebody offs him, and so they're like, all right, it's go, it's go, it's go. Like I just picture David Lynch as being literally like the angel of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Mm.
And the second that he departed, it was like burn it to the ground. Like some cosmic level, it was just like, all right, we're clear, we're clear. Take fire.
Mm.
Target hog.
Yeah, the VIP's left, so we can just go for it now. Yeah.
But it's striking that he is such a positive force and such a like I truly feel like he's angelic. Like he reminds me of did you ever see uh Wings of Desire?
Oh, I mean, if you described the plot, maybe. Because, I mean, was that the World War II bomber kind of film about, was that it? I'm not
Oh
sure.
no, it's well it's part black and white, part color. And
Hmm.
it's about an angel starting
Okay.
decides to become incarnate um
Hmm.
for love basically.
Okay.
But like Cassiel is in it and Peter Falk plays himself who is also an angel. Like
Cool.
he's Peter Falk as Peter Falk, but he's an incarnate angel and he talks to the main character angel and he's like, you got to try the coffee. It's really good. Like that kind of thing. That's how I think of David Lynch. Like I think of him as being someone that very much came here on a mission and
Mm.
did it very, very successfully and left at exactly the right time. And it truly feels angelic to me. Like it feels like this man was loving a place that is so seedy and so corrupt and so like gross in so many ways, but he saw the beauty in it and chose to like elevate that. It wasn't just like I'm gonna be in LA and tolerate it. It was like he loved that city. Um,
Mm. Mm.
I don't know. There's something really special about that to me. That's someone very positive and very like good, like in seemingly inherently good could be like, this is the place for me, and it's this like to me a nightmare, you know?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, look, I agree. I think it's hard not to think astrologically when, someone like Lynch passes away, and the synastry between David Lynch's natal chart and the chart of the day or the time, or actually the day, we don't have the time, when Los Angeles was named, which is kind of used as an ersatz birth chart for the city, is really good because I believe it's either his natal Neptune conjoins the Venus of Los Angeles, or vice versa. I could pull the chart up, but there's this synastry between Venus and Neptune for
Oh.
the two individuals, and the way in which you just described it is perfect. It perfectly represents the planets involved, Venus and Neptune. It represents the sign that they're in, which is Libra, and it represents the relationship, which is to look for beauty in what can be quite a seedy city from at least the images that we receive down here and that most people get in the world, right? And I think having that relationship of being like a kind of saving or guardian angel or some sort of graceful being that sort of elevates the tenor and the tone of the city, that's wonderfully reflected in at least the astrological kind of analysis of Lynch's relationship to the city itself. It's a beautiful love letter, those two charts together.
Hmm. And Neptune's also about dreaming, correct? Isn't that usually?
It
Yeah.
is.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of reflections. Yeah. It's really hard not to think about it that way.
It's really interesting. It's good to get the astrological point of view on it because I it's basically all intuition and vibes over here. Like I'll only check the chart if I'm doing a major enchantment, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's really interesting. Yeah, I was watching a couple interviews too, and I was like even furthering this idea of him being somehow angelic almost. Like there's a well, it also reminds me of something I've brought up many times in the show where like when we were all doing angel scrying as a group, one of the big things that came through is that humans who are in flow are angelic.
Mm.
That came up when I was listening to an interview about it was him and Naomi Watts talking about Mulholland Drive and how he doesn't he never had actors or actresses that he was auditioning run a scene. Never.
Mm.
He
Mm.
would just look them in the eye and like talk to them and get the feel of who they were and just be like,
Mm.
oh,
Mm.
this is the person. This is the person. And I guess he didn't really direct much. He would just like let them do what they wanted and then kind of add things. So there's this sense of like using that intuition and like actually connecting to the human, the human being who is going to be the vessel for this character and seeing if they're an apt vessel rather than can their skill level like mechanistically achieve this desired result. Which again is
Mm.
like in flow and thus like more angelic.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely like the kind of really unique ability that he had to kind of present authentically as engaging with the other on the level of, I guess it's a higher octave of interaction. It's not necessarily present in his natal chart, except when you look at, the ruler, like all of the rulers of his ascendant and his sun and his Venus and his Mercury. They're exactly conjoined together to the minute, or to the degree, not necessarily to the minute, in Cancer. And so they're not in great shape. Because he's a Capricorn, he's ruled by Saturn, his ascendant is Scorpio, it's ruled by Mars, and both of them are together in their signs of fall and detriment, respectively. And so he's got, I guess, a really interesting way of starting from one foot backwards and then
Mm.
pushing his way into interacting with the other from an already humbled kind of position. I think he's quite a humble Hollywood director, really, when you think about it as they go, right?
Yeah, yeah, like zero pretense. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Zero, and never seen him speak when he was like he's never running a script or running or being a character himself. Like it's
Mm.
always full frontal honesty.
Yeah, definitely.
That's so interesting about his chart. I would
Oh,
not.
Yeah,
it's a doozy.
and he's also since he's so Midwestern, that's the other thing. He came from like a really small I think it was Idaho or something like that, like a real rural background.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
like and he was like apparently like a really high level Boy Scout. Like
Oh,
just
no way, was he?
yeah, like yeah, it's like he's very opposite of like what he produces in a way. Um,
Well, it just made me understand Agent Cooper more.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
I
that
can see
having
a lot of that. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
having that like very firm morality, and then actually allowing having that and being that like that light allows you to dive deep into the muck and darkness. So that yeah, definitely of a piece with him.
mm.
It
Uh,
seems like he's kind of mastered the lack of aversion. Like in I forget what they're called, but the three things. There's these three things in Buddhism you're supposed to think about: aversion, grasping, and ignorance. But like the aversion part, so if you generally someone of a high moral fiber or a unshakable moral code or whatever, or who will come face darkness, they often there's a disgust. And there's a disgust present in the way that they portray it and the way that they talk about it. Um, but in his case, you don't see that. What you see is genuine curiosity. Um, so there's an ability there for him to see what's happening with unbiased eyes and still sort of maintain his own inner ground, which I don't think a lot of people can actually do that.
Yeah, he reminds me of like an Agori Sadhu, right?
Yeah.
Because when you look at what's in Mulholland Drive, which comparatively is quite tame when you look at Blue Velvet or Inland Empire or something along those lines, right? The content is still at times deliberately disgusting. You've got rotting bodies, you've got
mm,
demonic figures. The cinematography and the aesthetic is quite grimy, and there's a real theme of putrefaction that runs through
mm,
the whole movie. And yet he approaches it like a sadhu in a cremation ground surrounded by burning dead bodies and yet able to maintain a kind of spiritual purity. And, you can't really talk about Lynch without talking about TM. And I think that that sort of consistent practice that he's had since, 1970, whatever, or he had and since the 70s, really contributed to maintaining not only equanimity, when he sort of views something, and, that sort of comes through quite strongly, but also that ability to be surrounded by literal shit and burning flesh and all sorts of horrible sort of visual things that wouldn't ordinarily disgust a person, but then to kind of do so as though it's just something else. It's just another manifestation of, the divine or what have you. I mean, it's hard to talk about his spirituality and his beliefs because he was quite plain in how he described it and didn't really elaborate too much. But you can sort of see that little bit of the Vedic coming through in some way, shape, or form.
It's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think he also has, when he does produce something that is horrific or disturbing, it's genuinely horrific or disturbing. Like famously in this is the man behind the diner, which even when this is one of the few times I've watched this where knowing this was coming, it didn't fucking there's a quality with that shot when that character comes out from behind the wall that's like, there's a horror with it that's like being hit like a bell, like it just rings. And he's one of the few people that I've watched his movies, especially when I was younger, that he has that capacity. A lot of people, there's a lot of horror movies out there, but they don't actually produce horror. They might produce a scare or something like that. But he's got this capacity, and I don't know what it is. It's like hard. It would be hard to construct it. Like, and there's people that have tried to break it down, like filmic, like why does this work so well? But yeah, that they're and even things that are patently absurd, like tiny old people coming out of a bag, are horrible. Like genuinely terrifying in a way that most things, even if you made like a big scary monster, would not work. And I think there's something about it's kind of like the sadhu. Like I think the capacity to get there is it's a similar thing of like reaching a really high ecstatic state. It's just the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think that equanimity enables you to enables him to get where he wants to go without, when someone wants to sell you on something, or they want something out of you, or they want to make a point, like it's like the desire is then present in everything preceding and leading up to the actual like moment of the sell. But like there's no pressure to do that. It's like he's not so excited to show you that horrific scene that he's like forgetting that the scenes before it need to be they need to be of a totally different, like they're subtly pulling your mind into some sense of like mundaneness or mundanity or normalcy so that it actually like tears the fabric of the world you've been growing to expect. But I think there's a matter of like not telegraphing that. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does definitely. And the word that sprang to mind when I watched that damn fucking jump scare scene where that demon emerges, right? Is like unvarnished, because the special effects that and the makeup and what have you for that character aren't great even by 2001 standards, right? You could make something aesthetically far more terrifying, but it was just an unvarnished representation of, there's the evil, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
take it. Yeah. All right, now on to the next thing, like, that kind of, yeah, that kind of unvarnished quality. And, you know, it's what makes that elderly couple fucking terrifying. I was terrified by all the old people in this film. I didn't get that the first time I watched it. But that couple that I think with Lynch, you know, either every tiny detail is significant because he's approaching this as an artist first and foremost. He went to art school before sort of becoming a director. And like, okay, so every visual element in here has some sort of significance. It's deliberately placed, etc. And you look at the old woman's teeth as she's descending the escalator with Naomi Watts, and it's like, this is a little bit uncanny. You know, this is a little bit sort of, ugh. And I was thinking about the film, and I'm like, the whole film is set in the uncanny valley. You know what I mean? Where you're like, what the fuck is going on? What am I looking at? You know?
That is the perfect way to describe it. It is really like the Uncanny Valley. When I feel like there's a lot of that kind of vibe. Uh, it almost seems like Tim and Eric just like took that vibe and they were like, we're gonna make this our whole thing, in a way. But that those those old people, I mean, those smiles, that's the kind of stuff you would see in an actual, like people use this term a lot, but an actual fever dream. Have you ever had an
Mm.
actual fever dream?
Oh, plenty. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's so disturbing. It can be something that wouldn't be disturbing in real life, but it's just slightly off, so it just shakes you to the core.
Mm.
Yeah, those old people smile. That was her main character's aunt, and right, wasn't it? In the beginning.
No, okay, so she when she arrives and they separate, they part ways, she says it was nice flying with you. Like apparently like that was supposed to be someone she just met on the plane.
Uh,
Which um obviously that's not what that is, but that's
okay.
that's what's shown to you. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
I this is a bit of a tangent, but this is also something I don't think I've seen in any other movie, which is having a first person shot through tears.
Mm. Yeah.
Like I have never seen that in a film before. And what's interesting is in the dream sequence, there's a moment where that happens. When they get picked up by the cab to go to Club Silencio, the whole it's almost like that same thing where it's like watching something through tears.
Huh.
It happens there too. And I've never seen that before.
Interesting. That makes yeah, that's perfect too, because she's like on her way to back to reality at that point almost.
Yeah.
Damn. I hadn't seen this since probably 2000 like 3 or something. And at the time when I first saw it, I was like, I don't get it. I just
Yeah, I
straight
think that's everybody's like how many times have you guys seen this movie?
two.
Twice.
Twice? Oh, I've seen it three or four.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've also like I've read like 100 people explaining it. What's weird is that like watching it now compared to when I first did, there's like a coherence it has that is like very plain and present. Whereas the first time I watched that, I was like, what the fuck? What was it was almost that like is that like anger? Like, why don't I get this?
Yeah.
I'm a
Mm.
smart person. Why is it I guess I'll have to find some other nerds to decipher this. Yeah.
When was like okay, are you more film literate now or is it that you're more magically literate now?
I
Like,
think it's all of it.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's all of it. Um, and it's also interesting I would have a different view, I think, than what most people say, because there's a clear like division between the reality and the dream part. But of course, to me, those are equally weighted. Like there's a lot going on in the dream, and I don't know if I've quite settled on how I feel about all of it, but because there's still like I was telling you, Brian, like that scene with the hitman is like the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. I completely forgot that existed in this movie.
Yeah.
And
Slapstick in the middle of the movie.
yeah, and it's what the other weird thing about it is it's punctuated by this very disturbing close up of the guy's hair with the drop of blood on it, which is like the path of the bullet like singed his hair and like teased it into like a frozen which is I don't know. There's something about that. I don't know if it's referencing her shooting herself later or something. But just that's this one little grotesque that's like very dark and grotesque, and then it just becomes the most ridiculous sequence of events that just get more and more amazing. And it's almost like does this need to, who cares? Who cares if this needs to be here? I think maybe he actually just wanted to make that, and then he just built this other story around that. That's I can believe that.
Nice. Because it was a pilot before it was a film, wasn't it?
Yeah, it
He wanted
was.
to do it as a TV series, so maybe it was
Yeah.
meant to be a comedy, and he just had to spin it out to appease his French backers and make it, more sophisticated than it needed to be, because he just wanted to see a hitman getting the shit beaten out of him by this woman that he accidentally shoots through a fucking wall. Oh, it's fucking hilarious.
There's another odd detail. Like, what was her business? She was like making like, I think it was like health supplements.
It was, I noted it down. I do have some
Okay.
notes from watching. It was enzymes.
Yeah. Okay.
But the thing, this is this thing with putrefaction that you see in the film, right? You get decomposing bodies. Enzymes are there to break down protein. It's what you use to wash your clothes in a mild form, but it's also what is in stomach acid that helps you digest animal protein. And if you want to get rid of a body, one way of doing it is to use really strong enzymes that can just liquefy and putrefy living flesh in a quick way, right? Don't ask me how I know, but yeah.
Weird. Man, that's a great little detail.
But it's a tiny detail that
Yeah.
I don't know where to focus my own sort of critical lens when I'm watching the film, because either every detail is like loaded with significance, which only works to make, for instance, the old couple more terrifying, because you're like, those teeth are off-colored for a reason. And, there's some deeper subtext there. Or you zoom out and you see the context in which you're seeing a sign for like a fraction of, a second or so about enzymes. And you're like, oh, they just needed to come up with a name for it, to sort of set the scene. It's a tiny little office building in LA, and it's all sorts of, mezzanine tier small businesses that might be dodgy, and someone just kind of is unlucky enough to get shot in the ass.
Yeah, something bit me hard.
Yeah.
I like, part of me feels bad for just thinking that was the funniest fucking thing in the world, was just something made me bad.
Yes.
I'm so, I'm like, at the same time I'm horrified, because there's the part of my mind that's like, what if this was a real person? It's probably my mother's voice, actually. Like, what if this was a real person, right? But and then
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, yeah, well, it would just feel like a really bad sting at first, and then I'm like laughing again, and I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're meant to kind of meditate your way through the film in as much as you're meant to notice that thought and not pay attention to it. And just keep engaging with the stream of images, without judgment or holding on to it.
There's I was watching an interview with like a guy who basically trained military people for psyops, and like how to negotiate people's minds. it was very creepy. He was saying things like that he could subtly and just with a few words in a very, very few sentences conversation, walk someone through the process of grief about an idea and they would let it
Mm,
go and then he could give them a new one. And I was like, well, that's absolutely that's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. But he was saying that to get the mind to sort of open up, it's like everyone's always running scripts. You're always like running a script that's well trodden and people are playing characters all the time. And when you disrupt the script, there's this moment of just wide openness, right? Like your consciousness just opens up and you're confused and you can be guided in that moment. And that's actually how I felt like viscerally that happening to me as I saw that the hair and the bullet in that scene. Because it was like everything else here makes sense, and then there's just this little detail that's like it snags a piece of your attention, and you have to be like, well, wait, what's? And you look closer, and it disrupts the expected patterning of like what you're used to in a film. And I can't help but wonder if that like I don't think that's like intentional to that level. It might be, um, but it's incredibly effective. And I think it also lends to a film being something that you unpack over time and you watch multiple times, and it has increased meaning. I think that's one of the most profound things about his work is that like there aren't enough pieces of art being made that have that like necessary replay value. Um,
mm,
where you scratch the surface at first and they don't hand it all to you on a plate and then you have to actually like dig. And so then
mm.
you've engaged with it in a way that makes it like part of you. Um, and yeah, that doesn't if you look around, there's not a lot of that. Like Kurt and I have talked a lot about how even with just the shots that are chosen in most modern cinema, it's like chess level and up. It's like
Mm.
this like TV sitcom like people aren't really doing interesting things with camera angles or perspectives or anything anymore. Um, but yeah, I guess
Yeah, and I think most, like, given the prominence of YouTube and what's popular on YouTube, most of what you're looking at is like this. It's like a Zoom call. It's just someone in front of a microphone sitting in their background. Maybe their background's slightly interesting, but it doesn't change. So it's weird that that's the dominant visual right now.
Mm.
Is these like people talking in boxes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And people watching it on a box that they hold in their hand, as well.
Yeah.
So like a while ago, I saw this clip, I think on YouTube, where someone asked David Lynch about watching a movie on your phone. Um, and like his response was just to like bellow out, fucking bullshit, like
Yeah.
he really became quite sort of agitated by it, which is unusual for Lynch because he's such a chill dude. And it's like, most people are kind of tapped into this tiny little square where they're looking at tinier versions of other people in tinier squares. And I didn't see Mulholland Drive in a cinema when it came out. I saw it, a bootleg DVD in a friend's apartment in like 2006 when I was at uni. And, I think watching that on a big screen would be totally different because all the other films of Lynch that I've seen on the big screen have been meant to be visually arresting, but also meant to kind of take up your entire consciousness. You know what I mean? Like you can't
Yeah.
see the outside of it. You're meant to be completely immersed in the experience. And when I was doing some research for today, I looked at Roger Ebert, that the film critic, the very famous film critic, and I'm like, okay, so what does Ebert have to say about Lynch? And she's just like, don't overanalyze, Lynch films. Don't overanalyze Mulholland Drive. Don't overanalyze X, Y, or Z. Just be immersed in the experience and come away from it with impressions and sort of go from there. And I think that's pretty sort of true to what he wanted, I imagine, for most of us, which is to go and look at a gigantic screen together and be, immersed in an experience. And it would have been wonderful to do that with Mulholland Drive, but instead, about 3 or 4 hours ago, I just watched it on my computer with my headphones in. So,
Same.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way.
Yeah, I mean that the whole act of going into a theater, um, I don't know if it matters because that's the other thing is that like that act focuses you because it's larger than you, it's way larger than you. It goes dark, the surroundings disappear, you go into the dream world, right?
Hmm.
Like because that's what in my opinion that's what film is. It's the collective dream world. It's windows into the collective dream world of our of the greater consciousness. Um but now it's just like it's one thing amidst 1,000 other things. And it's like um it's all scattershot. So like it makes me wonder, it really makes me wonder what someone who's growing up in this world, what is their imagination like? Because I think how
Hmm.
mine was shaped by cinema, growing up going to films, and like for better or worse, like it's also another interesting idea is like what is your imagination before if you don't ever encounter cinema? Like how does your mind imagine and think without it? But now I can't like I can't imagine how fragmented it possibly is.
Hmm. Hmm. And there's that sense of like tactile engagement with whatever you're looking at on your phone. You can pick it up, you can move it around. You can't
Yeah.
do that in a cinema. You can't skip ahead or you can't
Yeah.
pause it, open another tab, look at something quickly, and then go back and then hit play again. You're kind of just in there. And I guess, ways of imagining with people who are just kind of growing up where that's the dominant, not even having a TV that the family watch, just being sort of individually hooked into devices that are very, very hyper personalized. I think that's going to make it very difficult to share the imaginal through language
Yeah.
because everyone's got their own little gigantic universe. Like, I'm pretty sure we're all of a similar age, give or take a couple of years, right? So we all grew up with really sort of singular points, more or less of cultural milestones that sort of influence the cultural imaginary. And so we can have conversations about, stuff from the 90s and we're all on the same page. But I
Yeah.
don't think the kids these days, that's how old I am, kids these days, right? With their iPhones and whatnot, I think they're kind of going to be more and more sort of compartmentalized and isolated and finding that common language. Because talking about a film with someone that you've just come out of a cinema from and you've just seen it is totally different to watching something on your phone 2 weeks after a friend of yours did and then trying to have that disjointed conversation that's also influenced by a hyper personalized algorithm, which is only getting more and more sort of, you know, um, accurate and succinct and isolating ultimately. Where's the
Hmm.
language? We don't get that. But with Lynch, because he works so visually, you've got this you've got a visual language that's trying to communicate something, but also a kind of, I guess, an imperative not to jump immediately into analysis mode, which I think is the most difficult part for me watching a film these days. Because I used to just get into the experience. Now I'm just like, what's going on? Quickly summarizing in my head, trying to do 3 or 4 other things at the same time. I don't think I've actually watched a film for about 10 years, really.
Yeah. There's something about what you were saying about the holding the phone and being able to like move it around and stuff and
Yeah.
set down and pause it and skip ahead. It struck me while you were saying that. That's a sense of control.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And when you go into a theater, you're getting on the ride and you are relinquishing control and you can't get distracted because there's nothing else going on. And that in and of itself makes it more of a true experience and a shared one because there are people actually next to you having different feelings about the same thing. And Yeah, that's pretty wild. It reminded me of Kurt Vonnegut Jr., something he said one time about plays, about like watching plays. He said if when he saw Streetcar Named Desire and they hauled Blanche Dubois off, at that moment, like everyone was totally just raptured by what was happening. They were all sharing the moment, sharing her experience together. And he said, like, if I had been watching that at home on a cathode ray screen, it would have elicited no more reaction than like Sunday afternoon football.
Mm.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's still true. It's even more true because what the bubble gives you is isolation. Like maybe it's not the best thing that the hearth is replaced by the television. As Dr. Robert Svoboda says, it's a distorted version of fire worship that is essentially like being possessed by the fire in its distorted form. And I think that that is even like miles and miles better than having like the fire in your pocket and it's your distorted fire and it's not the family's distorted because then you no longer have that like you're saying pretty much like a common sense of human culture or a culture in general is disintegrating
Mm.
and there's all these like almost like many mycelial webs of different species who don't connect but like interweave and pass each other constantly like that's what it's starting to look more like and I don't know if that's I don't think it's a good thing necessarily but I worry very much for the upcoming generation having sort of a common ground a common understanding to be able to like look at someone else their own age and be like, yeah, well, this guy knows what I mean.
Mm.
But it's also to twist that a bit and make it more Lynchian is that it's not fire, it's electricity.
Mm,
And like Lynch has just got this thing where he's like, electricity's fucking evil, as far as I can tell. It's always a marker of sinister things.
Mm.
Always. Like the fact when the cowboy shows up, the lamp above him, there's no switch, it just sort of flickers and then pops on. And then even there's that sequence of the phone calls. Like there's the guy in the curtained room who makes a call, and then there's this phone ringing, and it's got this really weird lamp that's like shine at it, and it's just I don't know what it is, but that lamp looks evil. Just the bulb itself looks evil, and that's just a commonality in all his films. Is this? I just don't think he thought of electricity as a good thing at all.
No, no, not at all. Because even with the phone call scene right at the end, where where Rita, who's become Diane, gets a phone call from, not Rita, sorry, Betty, who's become Diane, gets a phone call from, Rita, who's become Camilla. It's so hard to keep track. But, that phone call, the lamp's looking menacing, but then immediately after that, the old couple come back and drag her off to this kind of, hellscape, and then they smoke bomb out and she shoots herself. And at the back of that is lightning, like
Oh
the
yeah.
set design and everything. It's lightning constantly. Did you ever see Lynch's ads for that French cigarette brand? Have you ever
Oh
seen
yeah.
those? It's zombies and lightning and shit. It's crazy.
My favorite little short thing he did was and it's funny because I've never seen any of these other ones, but I think it was the anniversary of the Lumiere brothers, who were
Mm.
early French filmmakers and like created early like color processing and a bunch of different things, and they built cameras. So it was all these different directors shooting shorts with an actual Lumiere camera. It was like hand cranked and everything, and it's only like a minute, and it's one of the freakiest fucking things you'll ever see. You should
Mm.
look up Lynch's Lumiere short. It's amazing.
Yeah,
But
we'll do
it's
that.
got that same thing. It's got actually it's funny. It's got the poofs of smoke. It's got the electricity is very prominent in it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I wonder if I don't know if he got shocked as a kid or what. Man,
Yeah.
I think Gordon White talked about this like years ago, but like there was a little thing in and it stuck with me, man. The whole like, what even is electricity? Like, let's think about this for a moment. It's energy, which we know based on like virtually every system of healing or even martial art that stuck energy is not a good thing. And that is the entire concept of electricity. It's energy that you're sticking. You're making it stuck until you want to make it flow again. And if you think about the idea of something being highly intense and volatile and at the same time stagnant, that's a weird combination.
and it's
Yeah.
always looking for a way out. Like
Yeah,
that's how it kills people. Is that you touch it and then it uses you to get to the ground.
that's like if you burn bridges by walking over them.
Yeah. 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 It's funny. You were saying sort of something that's highly volatile and yet stuck. That's the Mars Saturn conjunction in Lynch's chart right there.
Mm.
Oh,
Mars, highly volatile, Saturn, right on top of Mars. Neither one of them doing a particularly good job at keeping the other contained, but both desperately in need of attention at the very least. And I don't know whether that explains Lynch's thing, because originally I thought, oh, this guy must have some placements in Aquarius if he's so in love with electricity. But no, it's Capricorn, all the way. He was a very, very late Capricorn, but still definitely a goatfish, that's for sure. And yeah, I just can't seem to place where that electricity sort of comes from, at least astrologically, right? But when you think about it, like, the book Catching the Big Fish, a lot of his interviews about the creative process and diving deep and going down, 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 down to find the big fish. That's a kind of continuation, but also an opposite direction from the source of lightning, which is unpredictable and comes from above, just bang, there you go. That's your electricity. And so I guess that sort of is a lightning thing, but like you said, electricity is always trying to find a path to go down. And there's this weird, I don't know, like maybe it's a parallel processing where he's terrified of unpredictable downward motion and prefers to kind of take the stable, predictable path. But then you actually watch his films and you're like, what the fuck? I don't know. Don't
I
try and analyze, right? Ebert was right.
well, I could see him as being the electricity or the lightning, like trying to find that ground. And that's the searching, right? That's always like digging deeper and deeper and deeper. Uh,
yeah, as horrific as the like archetypal or sub layers of reality might be to the common person. For someone who's like charged all the time and trying to ground out, that might be a more stable, comforting almost place to exist.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
That's really cool to get that. I love whenever we have astrologers on because that's like Kurt and I are both not astrologers at all. But
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to bombard you with
no, it's
astrology.
fun.
no,
It
it's
brings like texture and stuff to where we can't reach. So
Cool. Okay.
yeah, no, I listen to a lot of astrologers, but it's always this weird like it just vanishes out of my head. Like they just sort of like it swims in and is like hi and then goes away. And like I don't
Nice.
no, I don't know. I have a friend that calls them all sky bullies, so I'm like, okay.
I'm more than down to hear critiques of astrology. I don't hear them enough in the strictly astrological circles that I run in most of the time. But yeah, I wish astrology would swim out of my head sometimes because it's hard to do something like watch a Lynch film without trying to force it through some sort of explanatory structure.
dude,
And
that sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
does that
no,
get
no, please go.
overwhelming? Does that get overwhelming? Like
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
well, I'm curious, like, as you're really getting into when you were starting and really like learning and diving deep into it, was there like a challenge not to become like an OCD person who's just like constantly relating every tiny little thing. Like, oh, I spilled my milk. That was Mars doing whatever. Like just constantly searching
Venus,
always.
Venus Mars opposition.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mars and Cancer probably for spilt milk. Incidentally, one of Lynch's placements. So yeah,
Can't escape it.
can't escape it, mate. Yes, it was very difficult not to sort of turn everything into an astrology conversation. But when I started, it was a very isolated start. So like Gordon, I grew up in Newcastle, and like Gordon, I felt quite isolated. So finding Rune Soup was a revelation, and then finding out that Gordon was from Newcastle was also a revelation. But there was no one to talk to about it. And yet I was like consuming all of this information. And I'm like, well, this is just a really nice thought experiment to run in my head that I, generally speaking, must not ever talk to anyone about, lest I be, branded and cast out. And then all of a sudden, there was just this big boom. I don't know, I guess, 2000 and, I don't know, 14, 15, it started to really hit Australia. And I found communities. And then it's like, not only is it the current mood, which is everyone's at least a little bit conversant in astrology, but there was like a preceding 15 years of content just pent up because I could never talk to anyone about it. And I just fucking hammered everyone who's like, oh, I'm kind of into astrology. Oh, really? Let's talk.
Are you really though? Are you really
really?
into it? Let me see.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
No,
you have kind of a planet above your head right now.
I have it, yeah, and planetary altars all throughout as well.
Is
Yeah, it's
there
hard not to.
is there I actually am curious about this. Is there a split in that between people who do follow it but then don't necessarily, I don't know, believe in the materia and the talismans and the real magic component of it?
Yeah.
Are there people that are like, no, that's nonsense?
Yes, and those people are still the majority. So the majority of people, at least prior to, I guess, uh, the explosion of magic, which happened kind of concurrently with astrology, would not sort of acknowledge or recognize the magical applications or origins of astrology historically. And so it was very much a psychological model. So it was very much based in the mind. It was definitely the dominant narrative in astrological circles until at least 2011, 2012, when Chris Brennan sort of through Project Hindsight sort of popularized the more sort of Hellenistic roots of astrology. And then famously continued to refuse to accept that there was a magical undercurrent to it. But as a result of his work, we were able to kind of access people like Austin Coppock and, for those who wanted to dig deeper, Robert Zola and, Chris Warnock, who's my teacher. And, so it's still a subset. It's still a niche within a niche, for people who kind of engage with the materia. And it's an interesting place. There's probably a handful, relatively, comparatively, there's a handful of us relative to the rest of the population of astrologers and people who are interested in astrological sort of topics generally. It's yeah, it's still lonely, but less so these days, and it's nice. It's nice to find people like yourselves in online communities like Rune Soup and like the Discord servers that sort of we both kind of are parts of. Because it allows you to kind of have conversations that realistically I never thought I would be able to do ever.
Yeah.
Made my peace with that a while ago, and it's just a nice, pleasant surprise.
I think it's also fascinating because we're in a time where, and I'm curious what you would actually think about this, where people who are interested in it probably have access to more talismans than any other human in existence, like something that was super, super rare. So like I have a good half dozen at least.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, like, what is your feeling about if when you start stacking them? What do you think is going on there? Could you
When,
stack enough talismans to where you just like burst into a beam of light? Like there's just nothing affects you. Like what?
um, you burst into a beam of light. That'd be fucking hilarious. Yeah. Despite what my white balance would have you believe, I don't actually burst into a beam of light. It's more like having 5 or 6 radios playing at the same time. You know what I mean? There's just multiple genres. It's very auditory. That's how I primarily, receive and sort of interact with the talisman, as a first order of interaction. If I meditate, it's a whole different sensory experience, but it's predominantly auditory. And so if you've got multiple talismans on, they're operating at different frequencies. Some of them are dissonant, and so it makes it difficult to kind of find a counterbalance in yourself. And other ones are very harmonious with one another, and so you get these kind of octaves of additional magical vibe going through where all of the notes are in harmony. That's quite nice. It doesn't result in dissolving into a beam of light, unfortunately. But I keep searching for the perfect election. So maybe one day I'll get the beam of light talisman and I'll just get out of this universe,
That might be the whole universe. If there's an astrological election that does that, it might just do everything all at once. So.
Yeah.
Rapture.
Yeah, definitely.
I've often wondered about the people who don't believe in spirits or aren't animists, who are like into astrology, but like if they don't have any other kind of practice in their life. I mean, to be honest, I worry about this with the people who do as well. But it seems like in astrological communities and circles, there's so much of like what Kurt was asking, if it's an issue for like trying to compartmentalize everything or label everything as you go through the world. And while that seems like its own obstacle, but more than that, I would I would worry about, and I think that for me, it's best to not pay too much attention, because whatever I have going on in my mind, whatever my mind is putting energy into, that's more of a presence in my life. So
Mm,
like the more I pay attention to the planets, I am convinced the more they affect me.
mm,
So it's like
yeah.
you're invoking without realizing that if you're worried about this aspect that's coming up for you, and you can't, like, part of your mind is over here fixated on it, you're literally drawing that into your life.
Mm,
It's like the same way that a mantra, like the word for mantra in Sanskrit, like basically means like something to protect your mind.
mm.
And it's protecting it because you're one with that one thought and you're not allowing any other thoughts in. So like if you take that idea and expand it to astrology, it seems to me like there are a lot of people out there who think they're studying it, but they're actually dragging themselves through like the worst of it because their attention is not being managed. If that, I don't know if that makes sense. I'd love to hear your take or reflection on that.
I think it makes perfect sense, and I agree with you 100%. 100%. I think that sort of, while it may operate on a relatively objective model of explanation, which draws people in from atheistic materialism, and most people don't really leave that when they're considering astrology. The temptation is to sort of point to the relationship between the planets and the individual. In terms of transits, and go, this is objectively true, or my version of astrology is objectively true. But really what you've got is just something that is a very nicely shaped lock for the key of the modern mind to slide into, to, take, I guess, the atheistic materialist explanation of how things work that we were all kind of raised in and that kids are still raised in. It's still the dominant worldview for now. And, astrology is something that has that kind of shape that you can step into and through. But if you do it for long enough, or if you dig deep enough, you find that every kind of astrology, including some that would have David Lynch be a Capricorn, and some that would have him be an Aquarius, and some that would sort of present the data in radically different ways, they all fucking work. Do you know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
I don't know a lot about Thai amulets, for instance, but I do know that there's an astrological basis for it, and I do know that that comes from a Vedic sidereal zodiac, and that is radically different. Like Western astrologers would cheer the ingress of Jupiter into tropical Cancer. And look at all of the signs and portents and the synchronicities and go, that's Jupiter in Cancer, that's Jupiter in Cancer. Meanwhile, a billion people who are literally a billion people who sort of exist within a Vedic framework would be waiting an additional 6 months for Jupiter to ingress into sidereal Cancer and would be having a totally different explanation for the effects that they're seeing, comparatively. So it's really, while it's tempting, it's something you have to be mindful of, which is that you dig in deep enough into it, it becomes about attention, really. It comes back to attention. So I'm not an evangelist, although I might sort of appear to be a fanatic, about astrology. It's just something that works enough and well enough for me to go, okay, this is cool. This is like a really matte dragonstone shaped key, for the lock of whatever you want to call it. Gnosis is a good enough word. And that's great, but also I could like I'll show you the most powerful talisman I have. It's this little sort of bracelet of dragon stones, right? And this thing I can feel when it's not on me. If I forget it, if it breaks, I've had to replace the string a few times. It's not astrologically timed. It's just something that I've worn for long enough that the natural properties of the magical properties of the stones have just decided to enter the chat, so to speak. And the next most powerful one that I own is this punch.
I can feel
Yeah,
that through the screen.
yeah. Punch
Yeah, so
Mukti
that's nice.
Rudraksh. Yeah. Not astrologically timed. I got this off fucking eBay, mate, right? And it's, it's not even Nepalese Rudraksh, like even by sort of Vedic standards comparatively, it's quite a sort of low ranking, item. But I've done so many mantras on it, like, tens of thousands of Mahamrityunjaya mantras and Om Namah Shivaya, things like that. It's just got this charge to it. That's an explanatory framework that is in no way linked to astrology, although you could draw comparisons. But it's the space for other magics is really important, and an understanding that deep down it's just attention that's creating a world and worldview. That's the most important thing for me. Astrology works, and so I do it a lot. And astrological magic by extension works, so I do it a lot. But it's also not the only sort of mode that I'm operating in, these days at least.
Hmm.
That's really refreshing to hear. There seems to be, like Kurt said, there's no shortage of talismans these days.
Yeah.
And people wanting to make them and sell them. The vast majority of those are astrological talismans. The vast majority of those are sort of following instructions of text that we have. And that's probably because it works. Um, but like you're saying, that isn't the only way. But I do think that people who are kind of on the like, oh, maybe I'll try a talisman. A lot of those people are a lot more likely to try an astrological talisman than, say, one of mine. Um, because I don't use astrology as like a way to do like this one and done, hit it at the right moment thing. It's more like I'll pick like 3 or 4 auspicious moments and feed this idea on multiple occasions and get this really well-rounded thing going on. Um, but like people are a lot less interested in that than like well, they did it by the book and I know astrology is real, so but I'm still on the fence about spirits. So I don't know about this other guy. Um,
Hmm.
but it's cool
What's
that
it?
you're working in those in alternative ways as well. And I think it's great that you recognize that it's just attention and it's well not just but like that it primarily reduces down to like that's what's happening is that you're offering attention to something or another thing. And in the case of like different astrologies still working, it's like it's almost like you're just synchronizing with that system, right? Like the
Hmm.
more you think about, you're embedding yourself within that system, and so that system begins to actually be real. Um, I don't know if that made sense. Yeah.
It's that it's weird because what I'm thinking about is it, it's two different methodologies. One is like it's almost like a laser jet. Like we're gonna focus this time down into this one moment, and we're gonna magnify and empower this one slice of time. And the other one is it's like the opposite of erosion. You're gradually like depositing energy in something and building it up over time. But they both have an effect, but it's like they're almost like opposite uh methodologies for achieving similar things.
Although I do want to at some point experiment with doing like enchanting something based on that laser election
Mm.
and then still continuing to feed it over the course of time. And basically both, I think, would be a really cool thing to engage in. Have you done that at all?
Yeah, so there's a daily planetary practice, and I guess one way of thinking about an astrological election is that at a particular time when the planets are in a particular position, you get one frequency that's sort of, rises above the others, and that's what you want to kind of capture and put into the talisman. But at other moments, not necessarily related to planetary motion, but instead related to time of day, and this is a little bit closer to Goetia or ceremonial magic. Like, there's a planetary day of the week for Jupiter, which is Thursday, and there's a planetary hour in that day for Jupiter, and it doesn't matter whether Jupiter's in a difficult position, which is where it is at the moment in Gemini, or whether it's like perfectly aligned astrologically. You can take an item that you've created, and then as part of the daily planetary practice, when it comes around to Thursday, you get your Jupiter talismans out, and then you're sort of suffumigating. I always sort of suffumigate because I burn incense as part of the prayers. And that's like a little sort of repetition that then builds up an additional layer of charge. And I'm always very wary of getting too granular with trying to explain exactly how it works, because by nature it's mysterious, it's occult. And we could talk a very particular language, but also there's a subtle creep of atheist materialism that seeks a physical explanation for why they work, right? That sort of enters the conversation. So it's just for that reason, like the inability to satisfactorily explain it by any system, materialist or otherwise. The focus for me is always on my own experience first and foremost. So that's why I was content to do astrology in my head for, a good decade and a bit before it became de rigueur. And then sort of there's also that approach to practice, which is more like what's just going to work for me, right? And, I think if you're sort of and unfortunately it's a business, right? We all have to kind of make money, and it sounds sordid to be so mundane about it. But if you're in a business where you're working with spirits, people will come that need that for whatever reason. They'll find you. And I'm sure you've had a similar experience, Reverend, where people have come, you know what I mean? Looking for it, and it's like, yeah, this okay. There's money going to be exchanged, but it's not hooked into a marketing algorithm. It's just, it's the algorithm in the sky. Who knows, right?
Yeah, that is the most satisfying thing. I wish it happened more frequently,
Yeah.
but when it does happen, I mean, I find that that's the majority of my interactions, and but I also like I complain about not having enough clients, but like I also ask my spirits to only bring me the right clients, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, this is I dig my own grave, you know?
Yeah. No, very true.
Um, yeah, I had a question and I lost it. So we're just
I've did you were you compelled to look at the chart of the actual film itself?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't
Okay.
compelled to do that.
Okay.
It would have just added more layers, right, of explanatory structure. And like I'll tell you a story about Twin Peaks. When I first sort of watched the series, it was in the 2000s, so I didn't see it when it first came out. But like looking at a flame for long enough, and you close your eyes and you get that after image. A lot of Lynch's work for me pops up as these kind of after images that are almost always kind of visual or auditory. And so for Twin Peaks, for instance, it's that scene where the Norwegians are leaving the hotel or the resort, and it's just this woman bleating, "The Norwegians are leaving, the Norwegians are leaving." And I'm like, okay. And with Mulholland Drive, I've seen the film twice, once in the early 2000s. And the image, the after image was that rendition of Lorandro, the vocal performance by, I can't remember the lady's name, but she plays herself. Rebecca Del Rio. I'm going to have to look it up. But, that after image was there, that sort of ringing, because it's in a really emotionally poignant scene. And the viscerality, based off that kind of equanimity that Lynch is, able to evoke, it's really quite easy and enjoyable to step out of an astrological explanatory framework when you're watching it and just go, what the fuck am I actually watching, first of all? And let's get curious about that, and let's just look without trying to jump out of the film or out of the experience too much. So I didn't look at the chart for that reason. I was like, I'll look at Lynch's chart because he recently passed and every astrologer's talking about him. And I'll look at, LA because, there's been a few really good astrological analyses of what the burning of LA is about on a deeper geopolitical level and zeitgeist level. But I won't get too into the astrology of Mulholland Drive. Over and above what I can see of the director reflected in the themes, the thematics, and the aesthetics of cinematography and so forth. So, short answer, no. I didn't. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It does seem like, I don't know. I think with my own personal modality, sometimes a lack of data is an issue where like I'll have to wait for the intuition or my spirits to come through and tell me what is going on, what I should do, what the best call is. With astrology, it seems like it is the exact opposite problem where you can just dig like a spoonful and find yourself under a mountain of data.
Mm.
Like
Yeah,
total.
well, it's about how do you collapse a wave function, right? And again, like one of the more sort of interesting ways that I explain astrology to people who are approaching it from an atheist materialist sort of position is kind of with this Deepak Chopra level understanding of quantum physics, where, you're collapsing a wave function and you're taking a universal when you look at a birth chart and you're making it particular, right? You're particleizing a waveform. And you're taking the kind of flow of time and space and you're chopping it down to a time and a location and a set of coordinates, basically. And that data gets surfaced through a chart. And that's kind of, infinitely repeatable because how many moments are there, right? You can go down to the Planck length and squeeze, a couple of million into a second, and each one is subtly at the finest level of measurement, different to the other. Like you've got to really learn how to filter signal from noise, and you've got to really consciously at the same time go, I'm consciously choosing to decohere this wave function at this time as an arbitrary point to make pronouncements about the totality of a person's personality and how their life is going to go. So it's, when does the moment of birth, when is exactly the moment of birth, or, is conception as good as birth, and et cetera, et cetera. There's so much that sort of already is filtering that data stream out.
It kind of seems, yeah, like that would be more difficult for people that don't believe in spirits, because those people think that all their thoughts are their own. Um, yeah, that seems like it would be a lot more challenging.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
don't, you don't know like the intuition telling you to like what parts to listen to might just get ignored. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it becomes intuitive after a while. And it's like you're using like a mantra, like almost like TM, right? There's a mantra system in TM that has no meaning. You're meant to have a nonsense mantra, like a little beach mantra that you're not given the meaning for. You're just meant to focus on that. And that fascinates the conscious mind and allows you to kind of dive deep or go deep into meditation. And I think the chart, the astrological chart, is kind of like a visual nonsense mantra that just fascinates that part of your mind enough so that you start to get the intuitive messages that then direct you as to which data points to kind of cohere some language around and communicate that to another person meaningfully.
Hmm.
It's a weird filter between the self and the other, but in very specific circumstances, it works both interpersonally and magically.
It's
O-
really cool.
Okay, you just connected it to tarot in a way that I hadn't thought about before.
Oh, how
Because
so? How so?
well, because that's essentially like that's what the tarot cards are, is that they're a sequence of symbols that are actually containers that the intuition pours through. And I didn't that's not how I had ever really thought about like an astro chart before. I always thought it was like it seems like it's just like you constantly like layer more and more data and like what is this guy saying? What does this guy say? What is this guy? And you just keep, but to view it like that, that actually I like that way more. That it's the passage through which the intuition can flow through versus a data set, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
And that,
Yeah, it might be because I've read tarot for longer than I've been reading astrology.
Mm.
So like yeah, I've got a tarot reader's mind and an astrologer's mind that sort of duke it out a little bit. So it's pleasing to hear that there's a connection there. But I try and keep the streams separate a little bit. But they cross over into it.
yeah, this has been very eye-opening. I hope that anyone who listens to this like really shops around before they get an astrology reading now that they're like, there's a lot to consider here about who I'm gonna ask to read my chart, actually. It's not just who has good reviews, is it? Necessarily.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah.
Uh, one thing I wanted to touch on was I guess I'm still pretty unfamiliar with Lynch's films. Like kind of I kind of lost interest when they didn't make sense to me when I was younger. And then
Mm.
probably about 5 years ago, I watched Twin Peaks for the first time. And then we just rewatched the first two seasons over the winter. Um, and the thing that struck me watching this, it's the same thing that struck me watching Twin Peaks, at least the first two seasons. Is that, and I don't know if this is like this in his other movies, but it seems like everything that he makes sort of revolves subtly to some, very obviously to others, I think, around possession.
Ooh.
Um, I think Twin Peaks is a treatise on the metaphysics of possession. Like it's a masterclass in how like emotion and desire and how things get in when things are imbalanced and even the way that trauma carries on and makes someone an easy target. It's it's wild. But it's a lot less pronounced in Mulholland Drive. But the creepy man behind the building, that's that just to me was like the reveal of the spirit, the intelligence behind it all that gets something out of it when someone like her goes off the rails. And like Kurt was saying before, like some people might be like, oh, the first part was a dream, the second part wasn't. So maybe that means that the first part was inconsequential to the rest. And it was just like she's just having this dream that's reflective of her previous feelings to the dream and what she might do after the dream. But in a more dynamic, more magical world, the things that happen in the dream are actually contributing to uh, what's happening in the real world, whether that came before or after. and like the beings therein are also like real. So whatever that thing is, he's there, and these other characters are aware that he's there and real, even though they're like dream characters, and it shouldn't, it shouldn't really, they shouldn't have outside relationships like that if they're just part of her dream. There should be nothing happening outside of her experience of it. So it kind of tells you that the dream world isn't the way that materialists would think of the dream world. But I see that guy as like he's who benefits. He's who benefits when the murder happens. He's who benefits when someone goes off the rails, or maybe maybe he is the being that receives and gets to keep the part of you that you lose when you indulge in that kind of darkness. But either way, it strikes me as like this very alive spirit model. And I don't think I would have gotten that impression if it weren't just for that one little jump scare.
Mm.
I don't know. Thoughts?
So many. I mean, there's, you could view it as, if you still want to assume, like, what she's experienced in the first half of the movie could almost be the spell that this thing is weaving to allow her to do the evil that it needs to feed on. Like, that's one take of it. You could also view it as like a chunk of that reality is what was meant to be or was supposed to be, but is corrupted, which I think is also another interesting take. I think a third way is that that's actually her after all of this. That is what she becomes from toying with such evil and executing such evil.
Interesting.
Yeah. This is off the top of my head.
I'm gonna listen to this episode later and then watch it again.
Well, when I was watching it, I couldn't help but try and place that uncanny valley feeling somewhere, astrologically. And just the way that everything is just a little bit sort of left of center, or queer in the old sense of the word. It's a little bit off the beaten track, and the way that things are represented just is familiar enough, and again, it's uncanny. And it's an eclipse film. It's a film about eclipses. It's a film that's shot and set during a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse that is never portrayed cinematically. But that feeling of, the sun being, well, it's meant to be sunny outside and all of a sudden it isn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that weirdness. We don't get eclipses down here very often. And if we do, it's always the top part of the country. But I understand that the States get some real good eclipse action where you get to experience the sun being blacked out and everything is just uncanny and no one knows where the bearings are, and even things look a little bit different. In astromagic, it's about the sun, the light of the sun being occluded by the moon. And in that moment of darkness, that's the portal, right? Through which the entities can enter. And I feel like the presence of that demonic figure at the back of fucking Winkies. We got to talk about diners at some point in Lynch. But anyway, out the back of Winkies, right? There's this, horrible demonic creature. It's like that's sort of what gets surfaced during an eclipse, is that kind of almost like an egregore. I don't know where to put it, thematically, or what term to use, but it's like an instantiation of the egregore of Los Angeles. Because the city is as much a character. I don't want to be cliche, but the city is as much a character as anyone else in that film.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's also fascinating, because that creature, what holds the box, which is the passage through which they go in and out of reality and into darkness, and the key that opens it, what does it have on it? It has a moon.
Oh, no shit. Really?
Yeah. It's a crescent moon on it.
Fuck. I didn't notice. I should have noticed that. Damn. Oh, thanks for pointing that out. Ah, good on you. You got me. Mm.
Yeah.
I just
Everyone's
We're all
staring off into the distance now.
no, I was just arrested by the design of that key in the box, and all I
Oh
thought when
yeah.
I saw it was that's the most fucking 90s designed box and key I've ever seen. It's like the last days of Memphis Milano, and they started to do locksmithing to keep the lights on, and they designed that fucking key and lock. I just thought it looked so good. I didn't notice the goddamn crescent moon.
else too, wasn't there? It was a moon but I don't think it was a star like you would expect. I think it was just like a little. It was either a circle or a triangle, maybe. I can't remember.
Well, it is. I mean, it's triangular shape. That's the keyhole, which is odd. Um, which I know that there's some symbolic thing there, but I don't know. I can't
But
remember.
that's the part that you need to pay symbolic attention to in the film. It's like, oh no, it's blue, and let's like pay special attention to the color blue in the film and see when he's sort of coding things as blue, the lightning's blue, you know what I mean, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. And it's like, oh, okay, cool, let's pay attention. I didn't pay enough attention, clearly, because I missed the fucking moon. But yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
is.
really
It's a moon, but then there's the hole in the key is a triangle.
angle. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love that. That was the one thing that when I watched it the first time, I was like, I didn't understand that movie, but I loved how weird that key and box were.
It's one of those after images, right, that stay in
Yeah.
your head. Yeah, yeah,
Because it doesn't belong. It doesn't
yeah,
fit anywhere else. So it's this anomalous thing that your unconscious mind remembers, even if the rest is a wash.
yeah, yeah.
There's I think there could be an argument to be made that this shares space with Twin Peaks. In other words, it's the same reality.
Mhm.
Um, Especially considering that uh, the color red and it being, that's usually brings the worse, right? That like and it's also odd that like the lamp that with the red lampshade is a tree,
Yeah.
Hmm.
which makes me think like that's how you would get to the red room in Twin Peaks, if I'm not mistaken. Like you'd walk through like trees, um, and the whole shared electricity. The fact that the man behind was it Winkies? Yeah, Winkies is like almost looks like the what are they called? The like lumberjacks in Twin Peaks. What are they called? The burnt looking people. They show up in the
Oh
they show up
yeah.
more in the third season. I can't remember what they're called, but yeah, it feels. There's all these other little weird things too, right? Like, all the movies that are being shot are 50s era.
Mm.
Um, the fact that the person who's in charge of everything is actually a cowboy,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was the dominant type of film for early Hollywood for a long time,
Mm. Mm.
and then slowly got replaced. But was like Hollywood was kind of built off of cowboys.
Do you think that was that kind of strikes me as like reaching back to the foundations of what this place is so that it like resonates at a deeper level,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
which totally
Yeah.
makes.
Well, right. Like it was the West, and then eventually it gave to the world its own mythology because
Hmm.
it was like probably originally built from cowboys and stuff and ranchers.
Mm.
And that in fact I'm pretty sure that was the case. I don't know how much happens in California now, but that's probably its origin point. So the fact that that's at the core kind of makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got that kind of overtone of Sunset Boulevard that runs through
Mm.
Mulholland Drive, right? There's a lot of sort of, references and things like that, and pretty
Yeah.
obvious ones too. Like I'm recalling the scene where Betty is, in Dreamland. She goes to that audition, which is the creepiest fucking audition I've ever seen, with that older guy, and there's like that old-timey car that's just sort of parked in that really quintessentially sort of, Hollywood shot of a studio, and an actress going into a studio to audition. And I think anything that's represented sort of in a meta sense around film in there has that 1950s quality, not so much because of Sunset Boulevard, but that's part of it, but more so about how, like, underneath that facade of respectable, venerable age, there's this putrefaction that's happening. And if you've noticed how he's represented older people in that film, they're all really creepy, unnerving, and downright disgusting
Mm.
in some instances. And in the second sort of part of the story, where it's quote unquote waking reality, for want of a better word, there's no longer that veneer of old things having this kind of respectable glamour. Old things and old people are both represented as equally decaying
Mm.
and, rotten and not great.
Yeah, that shows up even in like that hotel the director is staying in,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
cheekies, cookies.
yeah, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
who that guy later shows up in Club Silencio
yeah.
as the another. Okay, so the audition scene, which I think she's fucking incredible in. Like,
Mm.
I remember when I first saw that, like, just being blown away by how it was just like night and day. Like, okay, this is unwinding a whole bunch of. Also, what's funny is when she first shows up in the movie, she feels like a 1940s, 50s, like, go-getter girl. Like, she feels like that character in this world. And it slowly morphs, I think, over time. The other thing about that audition scene is I'm pretty sure some of the things she says to that guy show up later when her and Camilla are making out on that couch.
Mm.
Like some of the same dialogue points hit up. So I thought that was a funny, there's a little echo going through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's so much hammy acting in the first half that when Betty's in there doing the audition and she actually acts and acts convincingly, it's just
Yeah,
like that guy behind the goddamn dumpster at Winky's. It's unvarnished. It's unvarnished and it's just presented to your view as
Like
like, and now she's going to do yeah, yeah,
someone just shreds the curtain, and you're like, "What the fuck was I? Where have I been all this time? If this is where I am now." Uh, yeah, that was
yeah.
so. I've never been so like equally disgusted, impressed, and like ashamed of myself for being turned on. Like that scene is insane. And you're right. It's like it's like 'cause he's it's the building of expectations again. It's like uh handing you a laurel to rest on before he kicks it out from under you.
Mm, mm. Yeah, definitely. And I couldn't find the actor credits for the actor that's auditioning with her. He
mm,
looks quite well known because he's got a face like a baseball glove. He's clearly been in the California sunshine, actually working. But in a similar way, that guy I find creepy as hell. But Coco is the most terrifying character in the
mm,
entire film, and Coco, yeah, the landlady in the first half and Adam Kesher's mum in the
mom.
second,
Yeah,
even more terrifying. You bring in mum overtones to that. But I find her so terrifying. And she's so hammy in the first sequence, right? Where it's a dream. It's very hammy acting.
yeah.
And then in the second sequence, it's not so much, it's clearly acting. She's acting. And it's deliberately so, but then there's that kind of tinge of reality where she's also really catty and not
Mm.
nice. And that makes her, first of all, even more terrifying than she was at the start, but also like a kind of poster child for this whole decay of, aging Hollywood and how it's aging not very gracefully at all when it comes down to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
she's also dressed in red often.
Yeah.
Would you have that again?
Yeah.
Uh, I just remembered there's the other like Twin Peaks reference. Okay, he played the arm in the Twin Peaks. But in this, he's like the guy in the chair that speaks through the mic or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's very it's extra weird because it's almost like he exists in a different reality. Like
Yeah.
within that reality. Like they talk to him through a window. Like no one can get to them. And like I also love that there's like a couch in there that like who the hell gets to sit in that room with that guy? Because I don't think that's how that works at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost looked like the background he chose for a Zoom call or something. Like it doesn't like look like he'd really be in that room. It kind of reminded me of the underground like or the secret facility in The Return. Like just this idea of like another world beyond glass.
Mm-hmm.
And and let's face it, if you're a little person, like you are inherently otherworldly. And like rather than use like I'm all for using like natural, innate, physical like aesthetics. Like they should be utilized for things like art without any. But rather than use that for comedy, like using it to make something feel like just other, it's just brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely.
Mm.
I don't think we have a lot of dwarf listenership, so I think we should be fine.
It's funny, I almost feel like that character in that room, much like the man behind Winkies, is that there's a stronger reality to them, even though they're in the dream space, and that's why he's got to be contained in his own room because he's in a reality even beyond this reality.
Mm.
So I feel like there's more to him and like his influence on things. He's much like the arm in Twin Peaks, which I think he's
Mm.
kind of playing an echo of, because it's also a room with lined with curtains, much like the Red Room. in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I noticed that too. It does feel like if not like intentionally set in the same world that they would at least that Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive are at least like and maybe his other films, maybe everything he does, it's at least set in the world where the White Lodge and Black Lodge are very real,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
where there's this war in heaven under the surface going on for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's very visually evocative of Twin Peaks for sure. But being made in 1999 and released in like 2000, 2001, like chronologically, it's made after Twin Peaks, and because Twin Peaks was, I believe, broadcast out on HBO over there or something like that when it was released on TV. Everyone who went to see the film would have been aware of Michael J. Anderson, the actor, in his role in Twin Peaks when he's represented as being short-statured. And in this one, he's represented as full-bodied, albeit in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of dissonance is kind of like, it's what fucks me off about David fucking Lynch. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to start swearing now. But, he gives you this taste of resonance with something else that almost brings you to the precipice of connecting it up into a nice, tight little explanatory model of meaning. And you're like, I get Lynch, yay. And then all of a sudden he'll just kind of skew that just a tiny bit to make it not reconcilable with that character in Twin Peaks and not overtly a connected meta universe in which these, two separate pieces are happening. And I think
more like an echo or something.
Yeah, like an echo,
Yeah.
And I think the difficulty with Lynch, and probably what prompted Ebert to say, don't overanalyze it, is because like the logic that's at play here is dream logic and it's omen logic. And it's not, atheist materialist logic, basically. You can't look at it and go one-to-one comparison. You can only get these kinds of echoey sort of synchronistically sort of like resonant things, like two guitar strings. I'm rolling with the auditory references tonight, but if you pluck an E string on one guitar, you put another guitar next to it, the vibrations will cause both those strings to resonate. And you sort of get that if you bring two Lynch works close enough together, they start to resonate at different frequencies, and then maybe that's your portal into the actual Red Room. You know what I mean? Which is where he's now residing. Who knows?
This is interesting. If you're putting it in terms of audio, then Lynch films are essentially the gateway tapes because, like, what it's doing is it's bringing it so close to resonance, but not quite, so that you get the warble.
Mm.
And then, like, that is literally the whole scientific concept behind, like, remote viewing, like syncing your hemispheres. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, Mystic. So if you play, Twin Peaks through one ear and you play Mulholland Drive through the other, the binaural sort of third non-existent film will play in your head, and you'll phase shift out of this plane of existence. Fuck.
I think we finally figured it out. This is what he was just trying to get us to do the whole time.
I hope that there's a version of our future where that is a major religion. Like, hang on, I'm syncing my Lynches right now.
Yeah,
That is another thing. Okay, the music.
yeah.
How is this not Mark Frost? Like it sounded so much like Twin Peaks to me.
Oh, it's the same composer. And
And
Bennett, what's his name?
oh, yeah, I'm gonna butcher it. You shouldn't really ask an Australian to pronounce an Italian name.
Music was by Mark Frost as well on Twin Peaks. But
Yeah, but there were certain components I think that were composed specifically by this guy, Badalamante. What is his name?
oh, yeah, I remember that name from
Yes.
credits. I'm
Hmm.
seeing it in green.
And he's in the movie, actually. He's an
Yeah,
actor in the movie.
Okay.
he's got a habit of doing that, doesn't he? With Chris Isaac, sorry, and Fire Walk with Me. Do you know that David Lynch and Chris Isaac fucking collaborated on Wicked Game, the song?
What?
David Lynch kind of collaborated with Chris Isaac on Wicked Game, the song. They were collaborators. The most hauntingly beautiful, twangy country, it's just wonderful. I love it. It's one of my favorite songs. And I was surprised to learn in my hunt for Lynch trivia that he collaborated with Chris Isaac. The internet says it's true, ergo, it must be thus, right?
It
But
is right now.
He had an obsession with sound just the same way. There when what's the other one? The Lost Highway. When Lost Highway was coming out, I remember watching some sort of like behind the scenes thing, and he was working with on the score for it, and he had them take mics and put them in really long PVC pipes and stick the pipe under the door of the recording studio so that they could record the sound through the pipe. And I don't know how he mixed that in, but yeah, there you go.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, we can't not reference Billy Ray fucking Cyrus
I know that's
in,
that's the
you know what
best.
I mean? Like, it's even when I first saw it, I'm like, that's Billy Ray Cyrus, and then like almost 20 years later, I'm watching it again, and it's like I still can't get over the fact that's Billy Ray Cyrus, who actually does a pretty damn good job of playing Herb or Gene or whatever sort of
Yeah.
name he's got. And I'm like, what the hell? He's got this sort of secondary line of work, Lynch, around sound and sound design and composing and things like that brings that same approach and just puts it in this surreal, uncanny space, right?
That part destroyed me because I was just like it didn't until later when I was like, oh, it was the first part was a dream, and then I'm like, because I didn't even get that in 2003 when I watched it, and I'm like, and then I just laughed for like 5 minutes that Billy Ray Cyrus is like, that's like just a joke about dreams. You know what I mean? It's like at
Yeah.
that time period, if you were gonna have like a nightmare about your wife cheating on you or something, it's like what's the worst possible like thing you can think of? It's like it's just so funny. Like here's
Yeah.
this hunk of a man who's like yeah, it's just stereotypical
Yeah.
like meat and
And don't forget that 1999 was culturally much closer to that epicenter of achy breaky heart than 2025 is. Like we couldn't ironically laugh about it in 1999. It would have been a real gut punch for most people and most auteurs, right? To see Billy Ray Cyrus in a David Lynch film so close to that kind of pivotal event, of achy breaky heart.
Well, also, I mean, uh, yeah, like you would hope if you're a Hollywood director and your wife cheats on you, it would be with someone cooler. You'd want her to have
Yes.
better taste than fucking Billy Ray Cyrus. I think that's the double, triple pain of
Yeah.
well, I think that's also like that's like a very common fear I think for men who have money and influence, and that's like where their power comes from. I think that those types of men are always afraid of the other type of prominent man, like the man who's just super attractive on their own, like bigger than them, that more physical prowess. I think that that's like a deep-seated fear of men who have a lot of money. It's like this, like when it comes down to it, they know that their power is based on this thing, and it's not that they're just inherently attractive. And I think that was being played into there somehow.
Mm.
Well, they're both cowboys. The actual cowboy and Billy Ray Cyrus kind of have this cowboy persona. And maybe that's just
Oh,
my
mm.
tainted outsider Australian view of Americans. But the accent that Billy Ray, he doesn't change his accent at all, is my understanding. And he's famous as a
No,
country and western
no,
singer.
he's a country. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So he's a cowboy. And this Adam Kesher guy, who I actually quite like as a character. He's got this confrontation with two cowboys that literally put him in his place, both in terms of his power, right? Like it's like you're gonna
Mm.
say this woman's the way to go, bucko, and I'll be out of here. And then all of a sudden Billy Ray Cyrus is banging his wife. You know, just emasculated by cowboys, this poor bastard, right?
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. I guess that also is that's interesting because that plays into the whole like the idea of ranchers and stuff being like the original people of power in Hollywood because it kind of like both angles there. It's like what if that guy who's more attractive than you also has more money than you and has more um yeah.
Yeah, that poor guy just can't get a break in the first half of the film. I think when I originally saw it, I thought he was a douche, and now with a couple of decades distance, and being older, I still think he's a douche, but he's a lovable douche because all he wants to do in this is just make a fucking film. That's it. He
Yeah.
just wants to make his film, and he's just sucked into these kind of machinations of power that are exercised on him from every angle, with a view to stopping him from getting what he wants, which is that sort of, ability to make the film, so to speak. And I've read because Mulholland Drive was a pilot and they shit canned it originally that like the director Justin Theroux's character was kind of like Lynch getting his own back against studio executives and trying to show up the way in which decisions about who's in, who's out, and what a film looks like in Hollywood is so much different to people's understanding, which is that, the director's in charge and he's God, not really, no.
Mm.
There's weirdos that just make decisions that impact the creative vision.
Yeah.
Totally obtuse and like, yeah. I also thought it's sort of amazing that he just has a golf club with him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like it's just there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know whether that's a Bob Hope reference or not, but that's the only thing
Mm.
I can think of from popular culture over there that could be represented.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
want. I wonder if it's just his
Really.
negotiating tactic of last resort, so he always brings it to meetings.
Yeah.
That is kind of representative of his like sort of power complex about not having enough power in like it's like this well I've got this if all else fails if these cowboys keep getting me down I've got
Mm.
this but that moment when she walks in for the audition and their eyes lock um that they spliced that in the interview that I was listening to about him and with him and Naomi Watts. And
Mhm.
she said she'd been doing, you know, auditions for like 10 years and hadn't got like anything she wanted to do or was proud of really until suddenly she got uh you know, got this opportunity to meet David Lynch and she was like so nervous and so excited. And she said she walked in and their eyes locked immediately and he just looked at her with like no pretense, nothing, just stared at her and then just talked to her like a person and asked a few questions and she said she left just feeling like did that just really happen? Because like there's this huge famous director I've always wanted to work with and like I just feel like I was talking to a person that I know, you know? But they spliced that scene in and I was like it feels kind of like that love that that director in the movie has for the when he sees the woman that's the one, right? And he knows it in his heart. Like I feel like David Lynch has that kind of like he's fallen in love in a little bit with like every female he's ever cast in a way.
Mm.
And you can like sense that reverence. Like he looks at them as muses almost. You can tell. Like there's this real love and appreciation there that I think a lot of people could just seem like a creep if they went about
Mm.
the same thing. And somehow with him it's like so wholesome.
That's the thing. Yeah, Lynch is so wholesome that, you know, I would be genuinely shocked if, you know, anything came out about him after his passing that he was secretly like a super pedo or something like that. I'd just be like, that's actually shocking. He just has this structural kind of fundamental place in my understanding of how the world works that also allows him to be quite open with that because I think a lot of directors that have you know, actors that they're working with that are muses to them, they try and play it off as if it's not the case. But I get 100% where you're coming from with Lynch and Naomi Watts and, you know, other actors as well that have just clearly captured his, you know, just done what muses do, right? They just capture and fascinate. I'm
Mhm.
thinking like 90s Madgen Amick in Twin Peaks, who it was just had no business being that much of a smoke show on screen and comparatively like played a rather minor role in the series, but whom Lynch was clearly through his cinematography in love with because she's almost always portrayed as just unbelievably glamorous, even though she's playing the role of a waitress in a diner in the, you know, in the middle of the, I'm assuming the Pacific Northwest, if my geography is correct. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so strange how it's almost like with that character in particular, you get the sense of like you want to fall in love with her,
Mm,
but
yeah.
you know she's not right for you.
Mm,
There's a weird sort of thing going on there, and I don't know how he manages to capture those such nuanced it's like a nuanced positioning. And maybe that's just because I'm a man that I feel that way, but I would wager that other people like that women feel the same way when they watch stuff like there's this sense of glamour and appreciation of beauty, but there's also the like almost harsh reality of who that character really is, like in their daily
mm,
life. That sort of it almost causes a bit of a conflict in the mind.
mm. Yeah, I think because he's so wholesome and he's so genuinely engaging on the level of the muse at that kind of frequency, that high octave of experience, that, you know, you can sort of comfortably show that character to be gritty and real without losing the obvious affection that Lynch kind of has for characters like Naomi Watts's character in the film. Because comparatively, the other actress, Rita, the other character, sorry, Rita slash Camilla, I don't think gets the same treatment as Betty. I don't know. This could be a bone of contention, but I don't think that they're treated the same way by Lynch. Not just because they're written as different characters, but there's this strange kind of relationship between those two as they're portrayed and shot and, appear in the movie, where I think that Lynch has got a little something extra for Naomi Watts, and it's odd.
Yeah, Rita feels more empty
Hmm.
Yeah.
or something. Yeah, like she's uh and I think purposefully it's just the surface for her.
Hmm.
Mm.
Um uh because that's possibly also what Naomi Watts' character is obsessed with. It's her coveting her. It's not really about who that is. It's just about her as like because she it's not only she wants her, but she also wants what she represents because she's not getting it. So it's both of those things together.
Yeah, who she is in the second part of the movie is a totally different person. It's like a whole human being with all these flaws, and like you can sense that she's like, well, there's some stuff there I might not like. But when it's just the physical beauty and she doesn't have a memory, right? Like she has to actually be an amnesiac to be perfect for her. So,
Hmm.
Mm.
And
yeah.
the fact that she also, they put a blonde wig on her.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that is pretty significant.
Mm.
Huh.
Yeah.
Almost as if like whatever she saw in her, she wants to see in herself.
hmm.
Mm. Yeah, well, you definitely get that in the second part where, they've broken up. They were lovers. They broke up. It was this big sort of fuck you from Camilla um, to sort of, I can't remember her name, but I'll just keep calling her Betty. But, like it's this big sort of fuck you because she's hooking up with the director, Adam Kesher. And, it's just really grimy and and it's more I guess about longing and bereavement, on Betty's part, um, and the kind of insane obsession with, wanting something that you can't have. And I guess that kind of makes it easier to look at the thing and go, yeah, it's a dream or it's a hallucination or it's some sort of post-life trip because the couple that take her out are the couple that bring that character in at the start. And
Hmm.
there's all sorts of symbolism you can weave in there. But I think, with Lynch and with Mulholland Drive, you're led so many times into this sort of visual koan where there's no right answer. But you have your practices to come up with answers until you get told no, that long enough that you transcend the no, right? And you're just like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. This will do. It's a space beyond words, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
How often do you think that that artists successfully incept you with their like spiritual views through their work like that? Like, I mean, that's something. That's like really fucking something.
Hmm.
Like to actually lead you through a transcendental meditation under the guise of seeing a movie.
Yeah, there probably are others, but s- they're not springing to mind.
It was like half rhetorical, but then I was like, actually, these guys might have an answer.
I think, not, first of all, Lynch gets into your head and lives rent free. Only a few other directors do that. None of them do it with the intention that Lynch appears to have, which is to kind of show you a universe in which, there's just a wholly different perspective without that necessarily being so full on and intense and visceral in terms of, the one single pointed focus of the work. But I'm thinking of Pedro Almodovar and the way in which, first of all, the cinematography is kind of similar. There's a little bit of a pushing the edge of the uncanny valley in a film like The Skin I Live In. And
That's a crazy movie.
isn't it?
Yeah,
And
that
it
movie's
gets
insane.
in there, but it gets in there in a different way. I felt, really uneasy after watching that film. More so in a way that was like, I felt like I'd been molested by Almodovar by watching it. I felt violated. But he was at the same level of depth inside me as Lynch is at. It's just that the intention's totally different. Not better, worse, but Lynch definitely is the only one that can kind of take a spiritual, a transcendental footing, you know what I mean, and lead you through that experience. Almodovar has other plans and has his way with you, accordingly.
Yeah, there are other directors that are arresting, but it's arresting in a different way. Like I'm thinking of Peter Greenaway, who famously like The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and His Lover. That's like his most famous one. But I've watched a couple of his other movies, and there's nothing like them. But he's not a spiritual person. I mean, he in fact I think he basically claims to be he says he's an atheist and everything, but there's something very, they stick with you too, just because they're so visually arresting. It's Kubrick's another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Like it lodges in your head. Yeah, man, that's a good question.
I mean, I'm gonna say Herzog does that to me, but it's in a totally different way than anyone you're mentioning.
Yeah.
He's similarly very LA though, isn't he? Herzog.
Oh,
Like
you think so?
no? Oh, I do. Look, and again, this could be like one of the curious differences between an Australian and an American talking about America. But I always associate Herzog's whole aesthetic and vibe with California and Los Angeles, probably because I saw that footage of him being shot when he was being interviewed. Like some random shot him with an air pistol, and that always struck me as quite Californian for some reason. But I don't know. I always find that him and Lynch kind of share a perch in LA. But that could just be me. I'm very happy to be open to hearing other people's opinions.
You might be right. I just don't have any personal associations with Herzog and LA. I kind of think of him as being like a weather pattern, and I don't even know where he lives. Like
He doesn't actually exist.
he just
He's only
manifests.
on film.
Yeah, he manifests every once in a while to make a film, and then he just blows away in the breeze.
Yeah, yeah.
Are like, do I have a father?
He shows up just in time like a superhero. Like, he saved Joaquin Phoenix from a car wreck, incidentally, in California.
What?
What?
What? You don't know this?
No.
No, this is definitely like an interview with Joaquin Phoenix, easily YouTubeable, folks. But he tells a story, Joaquin Phoenix, of driving, I don't know, somewhere in California, not South Central LA, so near some sort of rocky, deserty kind of place. Not being terribly sober while doing so and crashing his car, and who should appear but Werner Herzog, who drags him to safety. It's like when you hear that Harrison Ford flies his helicopter to rescue people who go missing. It's that kind of thing. Like Herzog's a superhero, and I think he's like California man, in the absence of Governor Schwarzenegger, of course.
I really hope he just wandered back into the hills after he pulled them from.
Now I'm going, please think about this. And then he just walks off.
You hear that screaming?
Yeah.
Oh man. That's so wild. I didn't know he did that. But
Yeah, no,
I mean, that's the thing with the people who are the most successful. It's like they aren't just good at their jobs. They
Mm,
are some kind of force of nature. They are something special, whether that be a storm or an angel or whatever. Like there's some extra human qualities about the most successful artists, like always.
mm, yeah.
Maybe that just means that they're really difficult to have a human relationship with, but but I think those people
Mm.
are like kind of more on a mission with their time on Earth.
Well, that's exactly right. I think with Lynch, you've got this almost like an ahat, right? I don't want to use the term out of place, but he's obviously quite spiritually advanced. He's most definitely dedicated to a spiritual practice. And I think while he doesn't moralize through his films famously, which makes them even more difficult to interpret, what you get is that kind of, and again, I'm going to risk using the wrong term, but like a Dharma transmission through the screen when you're watching it. And it's like, I kind of feel like I can live more sort of authentically in the world and I'm a changed person because I've watched this piece of art or I've viewed this piece of art. I think the same mechanism that you get with artists like Lynch and, others as well, who can have that transformative quality through the medium that they choose to work with, is not dissimilar to a great spiritual teacher. A lama, an arhat, whatever you want to call them, right? Someone who's ascended quite high and you sort of consume the work or you consume whatever satsang you want. And, as a result, you kind of got, you're better off for having sort of, I guess, resonated into their sort of field of influence, so to speak. And it's definitely there with Lynch, I think.
That is so astute, and it makes it even more interesting when you think about, like, if you look at the money behind what Holly and the research behind what Hollywood even is. Um, it's primarily a social control mechanism, right? Like it's primarily funded by black projects, and most A-list Hollywood scripts are run through several intelligence agencies before they get the green light. So there's this sense of when these things do get through, they're almost like snuck through in a way.
Mm,
And I think that there's some sort of subtle spirit of like sabotage going on. Like it might not be their intention, but what they're doing is they're disrupting the powerful, multi-headed forces that are pushing for a specific status quo in our thinking. And like these uh, genius rebels are out there basically screwing with that. and and I think to be able to like translate a real valuable transformative experience into a film, you would have had to gone through enough real life ones as a person to like know how they work, to be able to like make another one outside of just happenstance or whatever. So I think you're absolutely right. It probably speaks to them being like that's what we get in the West for this time period is we get these geniuses who slip through the cracks and are basically doing the Lord's work.
yeah.
Um, we've been going for like 2 hours, and I feel like we could probably talk about David Lynch for another week.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
But
fair.
um, for everyone listening, we will have every way to reach Matt, to check out his Talismans, to listen to his podcast, read his Substack. Highly recommend all of the above. His Substack is incredible. I'm still working my way through a few things, but that will get the brain juices flowing. Um, and yeah, if there's anything else you guys want to talk about or add, I just kind of wanted to do the rounding to the end.
Well, it's like, yeah, we could talk and talk and talk and talk, but no, I think it's good to draw a line. And thank you for your kind words too. That's really cool feedback. Thank you.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. Yeah, really, really appreciate your work, and I think other people should too.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to come on and talk in such a really cool format. Like I really dig these kind of long form, just talk until the talking's done kind of, approaches to analysis. It's been really enjoyable.
I'm so glad to.
Same.
Um, yeah, and we would love to have you back at some point in the future. We'll be in touch about
We should do Picnic at Hanging Rock. Have you ever seen that, Brian?
no, never even heard of it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We should definitely. That's an interesting one.
It's just up the road from my house. It's about half an
Have you
hour,
visited
40.
that place?
I haven't. I
Are you
haven't because I'm
scared
too.
you'll
Yep,
disappear?
yep, yep,
Okay.
yep. Literally, yeah. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
I
But
can
I
believe.
will visit it if we sort of are going to do the film. I will go to Hanging Rock, laden with talismans, protective ones, and then just see what the vibe is.
You could just stand near it. You don't have to go on it.
Yeah, yeah,
I will not. I will not. I would not. That would be like us going and finding a blue box
yeah.
before watching this movie. No, we don't. You don't have to do that.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
At least if you do, like, sign a waiver that says you didn't do it specifically for the show. We didn't ask you to do.
You have no concerns, my friend. It'll be completely free will.
Well, yeah, everybody, check the show notes to find everything Matt's got going on currently. And thanks for listening. And Matt, thanks again for your time. It's been great.
You're a legend, mate. Thank you both.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Bye.